Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video I will talk about Hypixel SkyBlock's lore. Yes, this hell of a game has itself some lore and it's pretty vast, which is why I'm going to be splitting it into multiple episodes. Also because I also want to talk about the lore of Rift, which is not fully released, and there's no reason to talk about lore that is not fully released. In this video I will talk about the story of Dungeons, told through its journals, dialogue, bestiary, and more. One thing I have to talk about first is time. I'm not going to get all philosophical about it, but I need to point out that dungeon journals are dated. However, they use a time system featuring AE. We have no idea who came up with this, but it stands for Ancient Era. We also don't know what happened in year 0 AE. You know what we do know about the first 700 years of this time system? Nothing. That's right. I created a timeline in an Excel document so I could, have an idea of what exactly is going on, and the first event on the timeline is very vague. We don't know details or the precise year when it happened. That continues until about 1100s, where something notable happens. But that's not where I will start, because I don't see a way where telling a story in chronological order would be interesting. So I will just follow the story told by the journals, but I will group the journals that tell the same story together. But enough of that. Let's begin with dungeon journals, and let's do it as fast as possible. You will notice a name of dungeon journals appearing on your screen. That is not necessarily the source of the information I'm telling you, but rather the journals which tells the event that I'm talking about which some details might be revealed later on. And lastly, I am stupid. Don't take what I say as a gospel. No, you can't believe what I say in this video. That's what the pinned comment is for. So the year is 1531 AE, and Carol wants to visit the tomb of her late grandparents, but they are absent from their tomb. Carol follows the tracks, believing she will find the people who stole her grandparents, kidnapped her grandparents, I don't know. She finds her grandman not so dead, not so alive, and she flees in terror. The Mage Association wants to study the undead grandmother. Blavier of Miles remarks that she matches the description of one of the creatures that attacked the castle 400 years ago. They give the undead a fresh corpse, which creates a new zombie, nicknamed 2. 2 is however too powerful, enough to tear the limbs from the body of a man. After the zombie does exactly that, they both get exterminated. Since he feared what might lie in catacombs, Human King sends an expedition there, featuring General Dan and at least 3 wizards, one of which is named Solomon, who is a member of the king's personal guard. Another wizard, known only as Royal Inscriptionist, is tasked to keep a journal of the expedition's experience in the catacombs. Very little of what is noteworthy happens. Soldiers point out bodies are missing, and the tracks where they are headed lead nowhere, which is explained in the journal The Wall by the fact that the rooms are in fact moving, which is not an experience we are having. Soldiers also point out the existence of talking skulls, which are located next to every shadow door. What's interesting about them is that they sometimes have a dialogue that refers to a game mechanic, which means it breaks the fourth wall. The reason it breaks the fourth wall is because I don't believe mobs you find around have names next to them, because not all the mobs are described clearly as being a zombie, even though every zombie is in fact named zombie, with the possible exception of Creepy Ghoul. After about 16 hours of exploring, they decided to take a break overnight. A singular zombie kills a soldier named Albert, and the next day they find a wither skeleton who is also described as something centuries old. The wither skeleton single-handedly manages to kill 3 soldiers. After that experience, they decided to take a break in something that matches the description of floor 3 boss room. Their lunch break, however, is interrupted by an attack of more enemies. The journal also finally mentions mobs other than zombies and wither skeletons, namely normal skeletons and spiders. Wither skeleton appears in General Dan, shows his strength by killing a creature capable of single-handedly killing multiple trained soldiers within a single slash. Guess what happens next? Soldiers, inspired by Dan's power, are filled with hope, defeat enemies that outnumber them, and live the rest of their lives happily ever after. Not. Solomon senses something terrible coming and warns Dan. Then a terrifying creature described as being half man, half wither skeleton enters, and with a single spell kills General Dan. Soldiers are outnumbered and hopeless, so they do the smartest of things. They split up. Royal Inscriptionist stuns a few mobs and runs. Few people follow them. One member of this group is then subject to mind control, presumably by Watcher. Royal Inscriptionist then finishes 4th entry of the journal by saying that someone must get out alive to warn everyone about threat within catacombs, but they are killed with a word, which is considered rude. In The Soldier Through the Eye, a soldier finds the time to describe his own experience. He notices he's being watched by an eye, but nobody else sees it. It visits him multiple times, then suddenly stops. During the fateful lunch break, the soldier claims to have sensed something coming even before Solomon. He is impressed by his ability to sense a threat before the wizard of the caliber of Solomon. He then splits from the group and is alone, where he is seen by the eye again. The soldier asks his stalker what does he want, to which the eye replies, "Special." Soldier doesn't understand, and the eye explains, "Your mind, hard to read. Who are your parents?" The eye then reveals the soldier's name to be Satan. In Satan's description on his gold and diamond head, as well as the one provided by Mort in Dungeon Hub, it is said that necromancy runs in Satan's family, which is pointed out by Watcher while he's reading Satan's mind. Another journal is unusual, being told from a monster's perspective. The undescribed monster wonders why are they in hiding when they are clearly capable of their goal of world domination. The writer of the journal also says that the wizard that made an appearance in F3 and killed General Dan as well as many others was in fact Necron. The monster mentions that Storm is going to go to castle to destroy it. It is also said that 2 humans are kept alive. Solomon was interrogated by Necron, about which we don't know, and later absorbed by Storm for his 3rd wither head. The second surviving human was Satan, in who Watcher was interested in. Necron was not the brightest student at the Mage Academy. He was one of the oldest students there and only knew a couple basic spells. He was allowed there just because his parents were killed. He believes that what he needs to be a mage are the scrolls of forbidden magic. But students weren't allowed to access these scrolls and they were protected. Stealing them was practically impossible. But one day, a scroll appeared on his doorstep. He couldn't believe what he was saying. It was one of the scrolls. He studied the scroll, he learned the spell and understood it would make him invisible to conventional magic. He could think of only one way to use the spell. It was almost too perfect. It was well known that the Wither King was imprisoned in a cage ever since his defeat. The cage was on the edge of the island and it was well guarded, and despite the immense stress that came with what he was trying to do, Necron was able to get in without a problem using the scroll he has found. He now stood before the Wither King. The Wither King and Necron started talking, and because they had a lot in common, they grew close, despite the fact that the Wither King had killed Necron's parents years before. Wither King explained to Necron that he was using a spell that used fell magic, and while Gaiman did not create it or discover it, he was the first human to study it. He was impressed by Necron's talent in it, saying that he has never met someone with an affinity for it. Which is funny, because they are the only 2 humans known to study it. After several weeks, Wither King asked his people for a favor. He wanted out of this prison. Necron destabilized the magical barrier and Gaiman was able to blow a hole in his prison, an explosion so strong it span across dimensions. Wither King then took his pupil to the catacombs, where they started working on an army. Another journal is called The Follower, which tells the story of Laptop, who lives with Dr. Emmett ever since Laptop was orphaned by the Calamity. Calamity is an event which I will talk about in another video because it is not too related to dungeons, it is more related to dragons. Dr. Emmett was passionate about studying the breach on top of the Hub's mountain behind me. One day, Dr. Emmett sends Lathrop to deliver a letter to his colleague in the wilderness, presumably in the Wizard Tower. On his way, Lathrop thinks about the breach, how it was giving him visions his whole life, namely he has been seeing an eye, and similar to Satan, no one believed him. Over the past few days, he had been noticing that the visions he was getting were getting more and more vivid. After delivering the letter, he planned to spend the night at the local inn as instructed by Dr. Emmett. As he approached the inn, he noticed a silhouette of a man in front of the inn, sparking a feeling of déjà vu in him. The man sat alone at a table in the inn, and Lathrop did the same. After about half an hour, the man went upstairs to a room where he would spend the night. Afterwards, a drunk man approached Lathrop and asked him about the man he was looking at. Lathrop recognized this from one of his dreams. Then, suddenly, and entirely out of his control, he said to the drunk man, "Yeah, I know him. Just a merchant from far away, who I had some business with before." Why did I say that? He thought. He then paid for a room where he would spend the night just as the mysterious man. Now, let's look at this event from another person's perspective. Imagine, for a second, if you will, that you're livid. a young man who at a very young age joined the Guild of Thieves, and at the age of 17 years old received the first assassin contract, and he took liking to this part of responsibility as the guild's member. So much so that he would only choose victims that would be challenging for him. One day, Levitt decided to hunt. He entered a rather busy inn to look for a target. He noticed a man in black clothing, sat alone with something that looked like a chest. Then another man entered the inn, and he watched the man in black clothing, with which intrigued Levitt even more. After Levitt's target left upstairs, he pretended to be a drunk and asked the man who was interested in his potential victim. Levitt looked into the room of his victim through a window. He made sure that it was safe for him to enter, and then he did. He pulled out his knife and went to the bed in which the man was sleeping, when suddenly he heard a noise from thin air. He knew what that meant. Magic was at play. Before he could do anything, he felt a sword penetrate his chest, his heart, splitting it in half. But he remained alive. He then fell unconscious. Lathrop leaves the inn and follows the mysterious man from before. He follows him all the way to the entrance to the catacombs. The mysterious man asks Lathrop why is he following him. Lathrop responds with, "I must. I have seen you in my visions." The mysterious man then asks more questions about the visions, and he says that if he follows the man he's been following to his master, he's going to reach his full potential. Necron then urged Lathrop to follow him into the catacombs. Necron took Lathrop to his master, Cayman, who instructed Lathrop to look into the orb of glass, the seeing stone, which prompted visions in him. He heard the command "find me" over and over in his head. It took him a while to decipher the vision, until he saw a house with a child, a woman, and the source of his command, Cayman. Cayman deemed the experience a success, and in the following few months, Lathrop would see the seeing stone over and over again as his power grew. Everything that was in the way of his power was removed, including his limbs. Over time, his eyes grew bigger and merged into one, and he was no longer Lathrop. He was the Watcher. Watcher was able to see into the past of his master. He was able to write it down in the journal called Memories. Cayman's story, however, is not very closely related to Dungeons, so I'm going to talk about it in the next lore video. Watcher was tasked to use the Seeing Stone to create a world where Cayman would be able to live in peace again, after all those years where he would be again with his lost family. Watcher was able to fulfill his request, and Cayman then instructed him to be loyal to his new master, Necron. Necron was devastated by his master's departure, but in the process, Necron and Watcher understood each other and their master better. They found that they have a lot in common, namely that the calamity led to both of them losing their parents, despite them being killed in different circumstances. However, with his master gone, Necron needed more soldiers for their Wither army, and they needed stronger ones, and he would need to teach them necromancy, which led to most of the bosses we know today being recruited. None of the dungeon journals mention Bonzo, Scarf, Professor, Dorn, Goldor, or Maxor. The last journal is called Until We Meet Again. It is effectively a letter from Watcher to us, the adventurers. It is undated and presumably takes place in the present, in whatever time system AE is in. It is said that after the expedition to the catacombs, rumors that Wither King was alive spread like wildfire. Necron sent his strongest soldier Storm to attack and destroy the human castle. The prestigious Mage Academy, a beacon of knowledge and power, was also brought to ruin, swallowed by the void, signifying the end of an 800-year-old legacy. Based on this, we can deduce that the first dated event is the foundation of this academy, which was somewhere in the 700s, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Necron's realization that his master's dream has led to the creation of not just an army, but a community, has made him question his desire for world domination. It is later revealed by Watcher that he was the one who left all the dungeon journals behind, and he explains that it's too early for us to fully grasp our role in the design of things, and he wishes us farewell. Now, this has been the story told by the dungeon journals, but at the beginning I said I would use many more sources than that, and I intend on keeping my word. So I read every single bestiary description from dungeons, and apart from one more 4-4 break, not a single interesting thing. Except that every other mob is above another mob hierarchically. Now, that is not satisfying, so I read the description of every single dungeon item. And it's quite a lot of items, and I found practically nothing interesting, but there are still some things I'd like to point out. According to the description of the Spirit Wing item, bats have magical abilities, which might have something to do with them dropping secrets in dungeons, but that's only the bats in dungeons, and there's a lot of bats elsewhere. Dark Claymore, based on its description, might have been the weapon General Dan used, but that is very speculative. However, it would be cool. King Midas has a brother called Bion, based on the description and ability name of Midas' jewel. Now, that's not a lot of lore, and I still have some things about some of the dungeon bosses. I'll first tell things that I learned from item description, specifically their golden heads. Bonzo used to work as a clown, but was pressured by his parents to be a mage instead. Scarf was a promising student, unlike Necron, interested in necromancy because of his late mother. He managed to preserve adventurous classes through death, which is something no one else does. Professor said that Scarf could do great things and taught him barrier spell. Scarf is the only dungeon character conferred to create a weapon, the adaptive blade. Professor was teacher of Scarf, possibly even Bonzo, and despite being a professor, he is not really smartest because he failed a test multiple times. Thorn is a shaman and a vegetarian, possibly related to Nico in Howling Cave, but there's no correlation. Despite allegedly only being a spirit and needing spirit bow to be harmed, Livid was able to consume him at the beginning of his boss fight. Livid was mocked even by his own disciples, possibly due to his death. Despite that, he is ambitious and egoistic. That wasn't the most interesting, was it? Item descriptions, journals, bestiary, that is not enough. For all of you good people on the internet, I have read every single NPC dialogue in Dungeon that I could find, which sure was complicated because neither of the two wikis actually had the updated dialogue, namely for Guildford, so if there's anything else outdated, I'm, well, too lazy to check it. Croesus apparently lived in the catacombs before, quote, they moved in all the zombies. No idea what that means, because he was never mentioned in any of the journals, and before Necron and Cayman came in, catacombs were used to hold the corpses of the Calamity. Croesus also mentions Widow Prince. Thing is, Widow King doesn't have a son. On the other hand, Cayman granted that title to himself, so Widow Prince is someone we might be seeing that is completely unrelated to all these characters. And lastly, Croesus wonders if they will open more doors in here. So if they do, they will have a hard time creating any backstory to the dungeons that might be behind those doors, which feels like they are shooting themselves in the leg. Mort refers to the residents of catacombs as our forces, which implies that Mort is against us. However, it might be related to the fact that Mort is undead and everything inside the dungeons, pretty much everything, is also undead. If the former is true, then Sol's dialogue contradicts it, because it is implied by him that Mort cares about the adventurers and doesn't want them to just die there, which implies that dying is in fact not canon. Malik is the first ever NPC to mention Calamity, saying that catacombs were designed to be the grave of its victims. Something that doesn't belong to this part of the video, but I'm too lazy to re-record, is that Watcher is implied to be immortal, since based on the journal of the Watcher, he is not alive nor dead. Bonzo doesn't say anything interesting at all, which is great because I spent 2 minutes getting here just to say that. Watcher's dialogue in 4.2 implies that he is learning new skills, despite spending at least 389 years in the catacombs. Scarf mentioned something called Wither Realm, which I only consider to be an anime reference because both withers, of whom we know the origins, used dragon magic, also known as fell magic, which is from the Dragon Realm. Professor believes that guardians are stronger than withers, which might be a feature in another update. However, currently, that is not the case. The existence of Thorn implies that whoever set up this arena cared about the undead enough for them to have entertainment, which is supported by what we learn about Necron in the last journal. Thorn's crowd mentions stuff like #NeverForget, which very much was not intended for a clown dying, or also Watchdog. They also reference year 2020 and the version 1.8, which are several fourth world breaks, unless I am supposed to believe that 9/11 is canon in SkyBlock. Livid consumes Thorn's soul at the beginning of every fight. After the end, he is said to use the power of shadows and mentions that his shadows will find us, the adventurers, wherever we are. We don't know what that refers to because shadow assassins have been appearing since floor 3 and they are not really related to Livid. It can't be his clones because they all die when the real Livid does, and he is revived by Watcher on the other floors, and he might have lost his self because he doesn't talk in the blood room. Livid mentions that his disciples aren't loyal to him, which might be caused by him immediately backstabbing Thorn after he dies. But who am I to judge someone's actions, right? Sedan says that his terracotta army is using souls of old warriors and wizards, and that statues are stronger, faster, and easier to repair, which makes us wonder why does nobody else use them. Saran mentions that Necron will cure this world, but nothing like that has ever been his intention. Storm specifically mentions that their intention is for everyone to be ruled by the undead army. Saran's dialogue contradicts what Mort and Necron heads have to say about the Wither Lords. They say that the Wither Lords have inherited catacombs eons ago. Saran, however, says that he has been ruler of this for 400 years. Assuming he has become the ruler of this fort immediately after the events of Father in 1532, that means that current year in AE is 1632, which means that the Wither Lords have been ruling catacombs for less than 500 years, which is not what I would refer to as eons. I'm not going to F7 just so you have visual stimulus, so this will have to suffice. Storm says that they are creating tens, hundreds of withers, which is odd because we don't see any of them apart from the main 5. He mentions the existence of other kingdoms, which I believe to refer to other islands such as the Crimson Isle, which is not related to Hub pretty much at all. Necron is the only Wither who shows some respect to adventurers, and while Storm refers to kingdom, Necron mentions a village. Necron claims that K-Man has said that catacombs are no more, which I don't believe is the case, because K-Man only gave up on his world domination plans to live happily. Wither King's dialogue changes when fought for the second time, which shouldn't be the case because I believe he has in fact died based on his last line. And while I do realize one of his dialogue lines says that he is invincible, his final dialogue really implies that he is in fact dying. And finally, K-Man mentions that he has been working on a spell for centuries, which doesn't fit anywhere on the timeline because he has been with Lord for only 22 years before retiring. And this will be everything from this video. I very much hope you liked it and that you leave a like and subscribe because this has taken a sizable chunk of my free time. And considering I have school stuff to do, it will be a while before I make another video, therefore subscribing and hitting the bell it will be useful so that you don't miss the next video. So yeah,